I'd like to introduce our next speaker before the break, and we're lucky to have Ron Meyers from CSA, and Ron has been involved in some of the development of these standards and trying to corral a group of 20 people, the same issue that Jonathan was talking about, to create these standards. And so Ron will be telling us a little bit about CSA Z1000 series, because Z1004 is embedded in that. So over to you.
You haven't heard what I had to say yet. Thank you very much, Richard. I'm certainly pleased to be here. My name is Ron Meyers. I'm a project manager at CSA. One of my responsibilities was managing the development of the Z1004 standard that you're going to hear a lot more today. And I'm not going to talk about Z1004 because Richard's going to go over it, and he's the expert, and I'm not. But just briefly, a little bit about our evolution of standards, how we're approaching standards, particularly in the OSH area. And I've worked at CSA for over 15 years, so I've really seen a shift in thinking and a shift in evolution that I just want to briefly talk a little bit about. But before I do that, I just want to say, wow, I wish we had a workshop on all the standards we developed to get the type of feedback we're going to get back here from this session here. Because again, in standards development, it's all about continually improving the standard. So your feedback today, your recommendations today will certainly help us look at how, again, as we look to revising standards, how can we improve? How can we ensure that standards are used, that it meets your needs? So this session is great. I do apologize that I have to leave around 11 o'clock. So if you do need to come see me, hopefully maybe at break, you can talk to me. But one of my colleagues, Laura Bavacqua, I think she's hiding in the back. Laura is actually the project manager looking after the Z412 standard on office ergonomics. She'll be here for the rest of the day. And if I can get back later, I will. But unfortunately, I have to get back for another committee meeting. So again, just talking about the evolution of our OSH standards, our approach. Why are these changes happening? What are we seeing? I don't want to spend hardly any time on CSA, but we're involved in many, many standards areas. Over 3,000 standards and codes, and we really are a membership-based organization. I don't develop standards, CSA doesn't develop standards. We rely on folks like yourself, experts like Richard, to sit on our technical committees and develop our standards. We seek folks from regulators, and it was nice to see that, Ministry of Labor, very actively involved in our standards development. Consultants, academic research institutions, industry users, my job as a project manager is to recruit these folks to sit around a table and somehow come to consensus on what goes in the standards. And it can be a very challenging process, as some of you, I think there's a few committee members around the table here, can attest to coming to consensus. So I always try to pitch that we're always looking for new, good people to sit on technical committees and help us write these standards. We're not a government agency. It's the first thing people think of, CSA, we're government. We're a not-for-profit organization. So, you know what, we rely on the sales of standards to help promote and fund the development of new standards and revising standards. So I was happy that we were able to provide you access to the Z1004 standard so you can view it and see what it's all about in preparation for this workshop. So it would be nice if we can give all our standards out for free, and maybe one day we'll get there. Some of our standards we do have available for view access only, so hopefully that number of standards will increase. But again, we're not quite there yet. So hopefully, after this workshop, some of you will actually purchase the Z1004. So what we do, obviously we develop standards, but not just developing standards. It's about making sure people can understand standards, they can implement, and they're using the standards. And so we offer a number of products and services to help people do that. And again, looking for your feedback, how can we ensure that the Z1004 is used? Does it meet your needs? So again, always looking for that type of feedback, and this workshop is an excellent opportunity. Standards are developed by consensus. So, as I had mentioned, we don't develop standards, and again, we rely on experts to come together. Again, labor reps, regulators, academics, research institutions to come together and sit around a table and develop a standard. And that's why it provides value, because it is written by folks like yourself. And again, it's a continual improvement process. They are voluntary. Standards are not law unless a regulator decides to adopt it or reference it in legislation. And currently about 70% of our OSH standards are somehow either directly or indirectly referenced in legislation, right? And some standards are geared towards, if it's a fall protection harness or something like that, some standards are more geared to having it referenced in legislation. Some standards are more developed for guidance purposes, that type of thing. And I think you're going to talk a little bit more about, again, how standards are being used. So why do organizations adopt standards? Because of our standards development accredited process using this balanced consensus-based approach. And again, developed by experts in the subject area. Adopting and referencing standards and regulation is fiscally responsible, again, in many cases less expensive and increased flexibility. And like all standards development technical committees, one of the things that they immediately look for is what are the opportunities for harmonization. We don't want to necessarily reinvent the wheel. And as we've seen here today, in the area of ergonomics, there are lots of great resources. That the Z1004 technical committee had taken advantage of in developing the standards. Again, lots of great resources out there. And where we can harmonize, where we can align, we will, where it makes sense. Voluntary standards are able to address risk management objectives without adding to administrative burden to organizations. So just a little bit of history. I've worked for CSA again over 15 years. I've seen a huge shift. A lot of my work is in developing standards for protective equipment, systems, machinery, tower cranes, mobile cranes, all kinds of things. And we're constantly evolving the types of standards that we're developing. So in the 1990s, there was a growing interest from industry, from labor, regulators in OSH management, taking an OSH management system approach, a systematic process that organizations can follow. So, as you all know, probably aware, we have the Z1000 standard, which was originally published in 2006, and that's continually being updated. And from there, we've really shifted to looking at, well, this approach with Z1000, OSH management system approach, certainly has become a lot more well accepted across the world, across Canada, in Ontario, having that systematic approach for managing risk. So you know what? We have to relook at our standards, and does it make sense to try to develop our other standards to be aligned with Z1000? So we're all taking a similar approach, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So here's 1000. How many of you familiar with Z1000? Yeah, probably the majority in the room, right? We work very closely with our regulator friends, right, in developing Z1000, well accepted. CSA has a history in management system standards. We were very early in the process in leading the development of ISO standards, 9000, 14000. So we're very familiar with the value of taking this approach. And increasingly, we've been either revising older standards or developing new standards to be consistent with Z1000. It is a trend that's continually growing, both within Canada, internationally. I'm also involved with some standards at the ISO level, and more standards coming out of are taking that approach. Again, we're all using a consistent approach. The approach helps identify gaps so they can be proactively addressed. So whether we're looking at protective equipment, machinery and equipment, processes, how can we use a consistent process to effectively identify and assess and control risks, whether they're emergency risks or confined space risks or ergonomic risks, right? If you have a consistent approach, it makes it that much easier for an organization to go through that process. So here's just a listing. In your handout, you have some information about kind of our core OSH standards. There's a brochure. And these aren't the only ones. And continually we're looking at all our OSH standards, and not just within our OSH program, but in many other areas, environmental standards, taking this management system approach. So you'll find some information there about our kind of our core OSH standards. And this is just going back. This kind of lists those ones that have already taken and being aligned with the Z1000 standard. And this list will continue to grow. If you have any specific questions about some of the other standards, please, either contact me or come see me. Laura's going to be here all day. We've actually have some more brochures at the table there on some of these other standards. This is just an example. I'm responsible for our emergency management standards at 1600. We're just working on a new edition of that that's going to be coming out shortly. So you can see, we've taken that Z1000 model, we've kind of tweaked it a bit and created an illustration that will go into the new 1600 standard, right? We did the same thing with Z1004. We played around with kind of various models, but again, it's doing the same thing. It's that plan, do, check, act model, that continuous improvement model that we're all familiar with. And you're going to talk about that today. What I'm going to really be interested in, and unfortunately I'm going to miss this part, is when you start mapping, doing that mapping exercises that Richard alluded to, and see how Z1004 maps to these other documents. And I'd be very interested to see what is missing, what are the gaps, how can the standard be changed or improved to be a little bit more effective, to make it easier to adopt, perhaps. Again, standards are living documents, and we want to try to find ways to continually improve them and work with our stakeholders. So, for example, the Z1004 committee, Richard can talk about this a little bit later, spent considerable time trying to utilize this approach, because they knew how important it is. They knew how things were shifting within the OSH community. And it didn't happen that easily. It's not always an exact tight fit. Not all standards that we develop, particularly within our OSH program, we're not going to necessarily utilize this model for every type of standard, but the 1004 fit that model, because it's all about risk management. So, common elements within an OSH management standard: management commitment, leadership, planning, implementation, evaluation, continual improvement. That's how the standard was structured. It makes sense. all in order to, and you'll see this phrase scattered throughout the Z1004 standard in terms of the objective of the standard, to prevent injuries and enhance worker health, safety, and well-being, and to optimize system performance. I'm sure Richard's going to talk a little bit further about that. One of the standards within that core series is Z1002. I'll just go back. Which is OSH, hazard ID, and elimination, and risk assessment and control. It's kind of a long title. I know the committee struggled with the title. But again, kind of one of those foundational standards around, again, we talk about, it's about risk management. It's about having an effective process in place to identify hazards, assess them, controlling, eliminating. And the Z1002 standard provides information on risk assessment methodologies, and it's a tool to help that utilize that you can utilize in, again, managing any types of risks. So I just wanted to kind of just point that one standard out as kind of a supporting standard for many of our OSH standards. We've also adopted ISO 31000. Again, it's a higher level standard, and we've adopted ISO 31000 on risk management, and Z1002, kind of falls underneath that in terms of providing those risk assessment methodologies and tools. So how can the Z1000 series of standards help you? Well, again, our objective to align with Z1000 is building a common understanding of key terms and definitions. Well, part of the criticism that we often get is, you get many standards, and well, we have a definition, for hazard. Well, it would be different in this standard and this standard definition of risk. So, let's bring it all together, use a common approach, having common terms and definitions. The cornerstone for all these standards is having an effective process in place for hazard identification and risk assessment. Cornerstone. You don't have an effective process in your organization to do that, things will fall apart. Having a process where roles and responsibilities are clearly defined, very important. It's part of your management system. It provides guidance on establishing a framework for the management of the various activities that take place. Guidance on managing OSH activities through all levels of the organization and all phases of the work. And saving resources by including requirements up front. Again, taking that approach makes sense in terms of standards. So some of these things that I've already talked about, I think you'll have a copy of this presentation. Certainly it's available. But again, I just want to close by saying this is a great opportunity for CSA to get feedback from you on Z1004, on our approach to standards, and how we can look to improve them and make them more acceptable for stakeholders. So I appreciate your feedback, and thank you for the invitation to talk, Richard. Any questions?
Because Ron has to leave us for a while, I thought some questions might be appropriate now, if you have any.
I know, again, my colleague will be here, Laura, so if you have anything. Actually, I forgot to ask. I did bring a hard copy of the standard, but how many actually did go in and view the standard before the workshop? Hopefully most of you did. Great. That's excellent. I'm glad that we were able to do that. I will leave a hard copy here. Maybe I'll put it in your possession, Richard, and you can, if somebody wants to flip through it. Sorry.
Are there other consultations taking place as well? And what is the time frame for making revisions?
There are, again, this is a great opportunity. We don't get this type of consultation opportunities very often in a lot of our standards. Sometimes we send out surveys, but we do organize certain ones at various times depending on the type of standard and whatnot. So this is not a regular thing for us. So we really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this and get the feedback, because again, you know, standards are living documents. They're never perfect. And the more we can align and make them more acceptable for regulators, for industry, for labor, then hopefully we're doing our job. Your other question was the timeline for revision. In accordance with our rules, our accreditation rules through Standards Council of Canada, every standard has to be reviewed at least every 5 years, if not sooner. So during that review, so usually the committee will get back together in the 3rd or 4th year to look at, does the standard need to be revised? Can it be reaffirmed for another period of time? As you know, or maybe many of you are aware that the Z412 Office Ergonomic Standard is currently being revised. And one of the objectives, and I see the chair of the committee is here today, so you might raise your hand there, over there, Lucy Hart. And one of the objectives of that committee, I believe, is to see how they can align with Z1004. So that'll be a very interesting project happening. So, but yeah, at least every 5 years, we have to decide to do something with a standard. And even there are times when we'll withdraw a standard. That's one of the options as well, because it may no longer be needed or it's being replaced by something else. But this type of standard, I can see, again, it's about continual improvement, and no doubt the committee will be getting back together at some point to look at how we can improve it. Any other?
Plans for providing, like having trainings out there to help when you do some of the other stuff?
Yeah.
Ron, could you repeat the question?
I'm sorry, the question is, do we have plans for training? We haven't, yes. Is it in place yet? No. Unfortunately, a big part of it is a resource issue at CSA. We've been reorganizing our CSA Learning Center, so one of the plans, and certainly important that hopefully we can get to the point where we are offering a training program around Z1004, as well as a number of our other standards. We do it for a number of other documents, other standards, and certainly this is an important area. So I'm hoping that we can in the near future. Yeah, it's really important. And it's about, you know, looking at ways to, you know, whether it's developing implementation tools, that type of thing are also being considered.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.